here, and today on Conversations with Lara Wentworth, I'm super duper excited to have Kim Wright from the US joining me today to have a very robust conversations about the legal profession. Kim Wright is a trailblazer and thought leader in the area of integrative law and has worked over the past 30 years or so to create a paradigm shift in the legal profession globally. She's a speaker, a trainer, a mentor, and an author of 2 books, best-selling books, Lawyers as Peacemakers and Lawyers as Changemakers. And she has very generously donated her time to speak to us here today. So I'm really super excited to have you with me, Kim. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know it's about, what time is it in the US at the moment?
It's a little past 6 p.m.
Okay,
yesterday.
Cool. So, yesterday. So just before dinner time. So we won't keep you too long. But I just wanted to start off with, if you could give us a little bit of a snapshot of who you are and how you got to be where you are today.
Well, I don't think I've ever fit in the box.
Mm-hmm.
I had, I was 29 years old when I entered law school. I'd already had a lot of different jobs, including driving a taxi.
Wow,
and,
I didn't know that.
And I went to law school because we had a very big family that often had legal issues.
Mm-hmm.
I had an ex-husband who liked to get arrested for civil disobedience.
Okay.
Like he would intentionally get arrested. And together we had a blended family of 7 children that had 9 parents among them.
Wow.
And so there was always, and we had a business, we had some kind of chaos going on.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation and decided that we needed a lawyer in the family. And
nice.
I had no idea what it was like to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I had no idea what it was like to go to law school. I didn't know any lawyers.
Yeah.
And so I went off to law school. And, obviously I got in and all of that, which I didn't even know it was hard to get in. And so when I got into law school, I actually was pretty shocked at the culture I found. And it was so adversarial. I couldn't imagine why people were competing with me. I was. Let me be just a little bit arrogant. I had 7 children, was running a business, working full time, and I made good grades.
Yeah.
And I started 2 law school organizations, and I volunteered as a guardian ad litem, representing children in court.
Wow.
And so if you wanted to compete with me, you were kind of on a losing road, right?
I'm tired just listening to you.
But this adversarial culture was so strange to me.
Yeah.
And so I decided at first I wasn't going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
And I finished, I wasn't going to be a lawyer, but I was going to finish law school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a quitter. I was going to pass the bar exam and, do all of those things.
Yeah.
And then I was going to demand that the world recognize how terrible the profession was. And so that's where I was coming from. So I had a lot of jobs after law school that were, not at all law related. My first job was running a domestic violence program as the executive director, which I was totally unqualified for, but still managed to get the job because I had a law degree. And I started seeing how important that law degree was.
Yeah.
And that it gave me voice.
Nice.
And so after about 4 years of various jobs and, not really finding my path, I was in a course that was actually called Wisdom Unlimited. And this man in the course stood up to introduce himself. And he said, "My name is Forrest Baird, and I'm a lawyer." And so I'm, perked up because a lawyer.
I know people like you.
And he said, "I practice law in a way that grants dignity to everyone."
Wow.
And I am a divorce lawyer, and it's my job to make sure that my client and and her ex can be friends at the end of the process because they have children to raise together.
Wow.
And so I practice in a way that makes that happen. And it was like the sun shone and the butterflies came out and everything went from black and white to color.
Yeah.
And I said, there is another way.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning. He really changed my life, and I honor him. He passed away a few years later. I honor him by being the messenger of that.
Wow.
Um,
That's it. I mean, you know, there's always moments like that in our lives that may seem insignificant at the time, but have a huge impact on how we do things. So that's a great story. I really would like to get you to explain to us, if you can, because when I speak about integrative law with some lawyers, I get these kind of what's that about? So I'd love to
how do
hear.
You even say it?
Yeah, well, yeah. Integrative. Anyway, we've decided today it's integrative. Integrative law. So I'd love to hear it from you. What can you describe to us what integrative law and the movement is all about?
It's actually been a journey, because first I took it from the perspective of being a peacemaker. But then I saw people who were actually litigating in a way that was still granting that wholeness and dignity to people. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, my first book, Lawyers as Peacemakers, I actually refused to define it. I said, you know it when you see it. But by my second book, I decided that I would ask enough people to talk about it that I could be some sort of a spokesperson. So in Lawyers as Changemakers, I asked pretty much everybody I knew to write something that demonstrated it. There was an example. And so I have 111 contributors to that book. Mm-hmm. And then I looked to see what did they say, and, you know, and wrote the rest of the book from there. Mm-hmm. And so I came up with 4 pillars. And it's part of the journey. Like, for some people, it actually happens in the order I'm about to say it. And for some people, they come in at a different place. Okay. But one is that when we're practicing law, we figure out that the law is broken, mm-hmm. or that something is not working. Mm-hmm. And actually, we initially think it's us that's broken, mm-hmm. because the law has been there for 1,000 years, right? I mean, you know, whatever, however you measure it. And so it must be me that's broken. And like, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I have all these emotions, and I'm not good at making them go away, because that's what law is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. You know, all my humanity keeps getting in the way, because in that design, that's what we're taught. Mm-hmm. And so then a lot of people go off and they find some practice. Either they go to therapy, or they do some meditation or yoga. You know, it's either a spiritual practice or a personal development practice, and you know, they're going to fix themselves so that they can still be lawyers.
Fit in,
fit in.
Yeah.
But the more of that you do, the more you see that it's actually not you. It's the system that is not working. That adversarial culture is not healthy for anybody, and you know, goodness knows we can see it playing out in the world and in our houses. That fight about everything is just not productive. No. And so the next stage is often that people start looking at, well, what is my purpose? What are my values? And how do I bring those to the law? And so then people spend some time working there, and that leads them to sort of a whole new consciousness. And you know, I look at consciousness as awareness. Yeah. You know, like right now we're focused on a screen and you know, kind of looking at each other, but there's this whole world that you don't see around me. And so if I'm aware of everything around me and I'm able to focus on one thing, it's a different kind of awareness or consciousness. Yeah. And so it's a more holistic, interconnected consciousness. Yeah. And then when you start doing that, you start seeing that when you make a change, in one place, it affects other things. And so it brings a systemic view. And so there, all the, like all the systems change stuff becomes interesting about, well, like I might be doing my one little thing in my little hometown, but I'm part of a much bigger whole. And so then sort of the next, it's like a circle here. It comes back to, how do I be me and still be a lawyer? And that's where people create amazing new ways of practicing law. And things like collaborative law, which has become collaborative practice by Stu Webb, and things like restorative justice and therapeutic jurisprudence, and redesigning the courts to be therapeutic. And, like those are all pieces of a movement of people who have gone through that process of becoming healthier, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, and then finding their values and their purpose, and bringing that into the world with a new consciousness and a systemic perspective, and then they create new ways of practicing. And so there's this whole movement now that when I started was not, like we didn't know it was a movement. We just knew we were weird.
Weird people change the world. We love weird.
and so a lot of my work over the last 20 years has been in finding the weirdest lawyers in the world. Like before that, I was sort of in my own laboratory of figuring out how to practice. And then for the last 20 years, I've been looking at finding who are the lawyers in the rest of the world who are bringing these new ideas. And most of them say, I thought I was alone.
It's interesting you say that, because I felt a bit weird for a long time, and I thought I was alone, and then I stumbled on your work and your book, and I went, oh wow, there's someone else, and then I found someone else, and then and that's really what's kind of inspired me to do these conversations, because I really want to bring people like yourself and other people who think outside the box and want to do things differently and change the culture and the system, to bring them to other people, other lawyers, because we've got this kind of idea. And you're right, we enter law school and it's this cookie cutter, system, and we're taught to be this way and think this way, and then very few challenge that, and it's not a healthy place to be. It's really not sustainable. It isn't. But I wanted to ask you, because I've noticed a shift in the way that some lawyers think. It's a small, slow shift, but there's definitely a shift and a movement. From when you started, say 20 years ago, when you started looking for or talking to lawyers who are weird and do things a bit differently, what have you learnt along the way, and how fast do you think this movement is going?
Considering that the law is so old and so embedded, the change has been really rapid.
Wow.
And there are things that I would never have expected 20 or 30 years ago.
That's great. It's great.
And on a day-to-day basis, you could just pull your hair out with how slow it seems to be.
It's like raising it's like raising kids. The days are slow, but the years are fast.
Exactly. So, for example, the problem-solving court movement is one of the outgrowths of this different way of thinking. And in 1989, the first court started, and now there are thousands of them around the world in something like 20 countries.
Wow.
And so that so that's not the way law usually changes. We usually look at precedent, and we have to prove the precedent and change really incrementally. So that's been a really rapid change.
So what do you think the causes? Because I know as lawyers, we are sort of, generally speaking, we are reluctant to change because we're scared of risk, and we've got this kind of rigid mentality when it comes to change. What do you think has been the catalyst behind a more rapid change now? Is there something happening?
I think it's happening in the world. I mean, you look at what are the best sellers among books. I mean, who reads? Lawyers read. And so there's that personal growth piece that we can do in the in the secrecy of our own home.
Mm.
We don't have to go
Yeah.
out and be, and experience the stigma of going to a therapist, but
Mm.
we can do that. And I read somewhere many years ago that lawyers were one of the top consumers of personal development work and
Yeah.
transformational work, but they never integrated it into the law.
Mm.
But so there's that going on, and then there's the crisis in the profession where the alcoholism and general addiction, depression, suicide rates are really high, and people are constantly getting divorced, and
Mm.
some of those things have gotten a lot of study. And so we have the pain happening, and then there's this outlet happening at the same time, and people are asking lawyers to be human
Yeah.
more and more.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things, if you're going to be an effective lawyer, you have to bring what they used to call soft skills, now are called essential skills, which I like better.
Yes.
But we have to bring those to be an
Yeah.
effective lawyer. And
Yeah.
so emotional intelligence affects even workplace safety in factories.
Yes.
And so it's really critical when you're working with human beings.
Definitely. And that's one thing that struck me about your work in your book, is that you're finally, or someone's finally humanizing the practice of law, because it is a bit, we're meant to be robotic and cold and clinical in how we do things. But we're emotional creatures at the end of the day, and we need to be human in our dealings with people. And I think, from my work with lawyers, a lot of the mental health issues that comes out of practicing law is this, we have to shut off that human side of us. We've got to be robotic, we've got to do our hours every day, we've got to be clinical and transactional, and that works for a little while, but eventually, we need to be human, and I think that's what's causing mental health. So on the issue of mental health, because it's a big, and I've noticed myself, more conversations being had about mental health in the legal profession, which is great. We need to step it up a little bit. So conversations alone it's a great start, but we need to start doing more to actually change the way we practice. What have you noticed in terms of the conversations about mental health and the things that have changed to address that particular issue for lawyers over the years?
Well, there's a lot of really good news, and that people are studying mental health of lawyers. Since the 80s, there have been some studies that that documented what I just said. And the studies have been repeated ever so often, and they've been they've been repeating. And the lawyer assistance programs, or law cares, I don't know what it's called in Australia, have emerged for people who, mostly those are for people who are in an addiction issue. But in some places, they're starting to also talk about other quality of life things. So I think that's a positive movement. But one of the, I don't even know if you know this, one of the projects I'm working on is I'm actually developing an app for lawyer well-being, effectiveness, and happiness that's based on those studies, neuroscience, behavior change, positive psychology, adult education, all of those things coming together into your phone.
Yeah, we need it. We need it however way we can get it.
But one of the reasons I decided to do that is because all of these studies come out, and people say we really need to do something. But the meditation being taught, yoga being taught, but it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and it's not changing the culture.
No.
So I'm really interested in that culture change that means that we don't need the Band-Aid anymore. That we actually just make it part of the culture, that to be present with a client, you need some downtime to be able to collect yourself, and to to set an intention, that sort of thing, so that you can actually provide great service. But if we don't have that time scheduled in there, then you're not going to be as effective.
100%, 100%. One of the things that I've also noticed, having been a law student very many years ago and then stepping into practice and, suffering depression and anxiety and really bad stress and all those things, is that one of the things that was missing for me, and I find is missing for a lot of lawyers, are those leadership soft skills that you spoke about earlier. That ability to communicate, that ability to connect, that ability to connect with yourself and be aware of your own emotions and all those things that are kind of the glue of what puts your technical legal skills together and allows you to practice in a healthy way and be a good lawyer. At the end of the day, if you're not well, you can't be effective in what you do. You've got to put that oxygen mask on you first. So in terms of the legal education, I know that here in Australia there is a slight movement and shift to teach some of those things at the graduate level or just before graduation level in our training programs. I still think a lot of work is needed to teach those skills, because they're not innate skills. You don't, people say you're a born leader. Well, not always, but they are teachable skills, They are very teachable skills. So I'm just wondering if you have any views about what maybe our legal education system can do to help sort of produce lawyers that are aware and have emotional intelligence that can eventually change the culture in the system, because it starts with the individual, right? So I don't know.
Most of the time, such courses are sort of not considered serious.
Yeah, the add-ons.
It's not part of your core curriculum.
I know.
And so making them part of the core curriculum, actually, like there's some law schools that are beginning to, in their legal writing section, they're starting to add on more of the relational skills. I think that's a really good sign.
Yeah.
At Monash, the medical school did a lot of work on meditation and started teaching meditation at the law school.
Wow.
That's
good. That's great.
I can actually send you a link to some YouTube videos that they did.
That'd be great. Yeah, we'll put them up on the.
And help me remember that.
Okay, I will. I'll send you an email later.
So I think those are really great things, but they're still in most cases. I think there are some professors who are fabulous, but when it comes to when they're going to cut programs because they're having to cut back for some reason, the first ones to cut are the ones that are not serious law, but they're the ones that make you a healthy lawyer, a good advocate, a good human, that really makes it possible to be a success as a 100%. Lawyer.
There are absolutely essential skills to be a lawyer and a human being. And had I sort of had more of those skills when I was younger, I know that I wouldn't have sort of suffered as much depression and anxiety and all those things. So I would have had those skills to manage, my life a little bit better. So definitely essential skills. So I just want to ask you sort of one question, if I can, about the future of the legal profession globally and what you see happening, especially with the rise of, technology and innovation in that sense, and artificial intelligence taking over some of our jobs and that sort of thing. Where do you see us going? What's your vision for our future?
Well, I think that right now there's tension between what I'm talking about and being relational and the AI. Yeah. But the truth is, all of those repetitious things that make us feel like machines are soon going to be handled by AI. And what we will be able to offer our clients is actually the human experience. And so if we're bringing those relational skills, those essential skills to the table, we're going to be more helpful, and then we can let the AI, do the rare discovery. The more relational we become, and the more we work with people, for example, to create contracts that have their own model for how they're going to resolve conflict before it gets to litigation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, you know, like bring in that, you know, this is what human beings are like.
Yeah.
This is my particular brand of human being. Like you know, I have these values, and the other person has these values, and maybe these values are clashing, and maybe that's why we're in conflict. And how are we going to talk through those?
Yeah.
Like that's a very human skill set.
Yeah.
And I don't think AI is, you know, is going to be able to be trained to be as good at that as human beings.
It's just precisely the point I make when I speak and when I coach, and that is that our emotional intelligence, our essential skills, our human skills, is essentially going to be what we trade in when AI takes over the robotic mechanical part of our job. And those who don't have those skills, there's going to be some challenges for them in the future, because there'll be some gaps that they'll need to fill.
Well, so, like the dinosaurs with their little reptilian brains.
That's right.
They might have to go away. But the good news is that if you are a human, you actually come equipped with a brain that can learn this stuff.
Awesome. And that is the good news. That is the good news. Kim, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really you don't understand how much I appreciate your time. I know we've had some technical issues getting you on the show, and we've been trying, but you know, persistence pays off, and this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So thank you so much from Australia, and we are very grateful to have you. I'm just going to do this. If you don't have this book, go out and get it. It is unbelievably interesting, intriguing, and just exhilarating. I absolutely loved it. And maybe we'll hear from you again at some stage during these conversations, as the app that you're working on launches and there's some new things. We'd love to hear back from you again so that you can give us some more insights and things to stick our teeth into. So thank you again, Kim. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's a great conversation.
Okay, see you around.